This episode is sponsored by Newbie RemoteConf. Newbie RemoteConf is a 2-day completely virtual conference hosted by none other than Charles Max Wood. If travel expenses are an issue or you just can't afford to be away from home for 2 days, then join us. It's virtual. This conference is focused on people who are new to programming who want to learn what the pros know, or just get a leg up in getting a job and getting into the programming community. We'll have speakers from all over the programming community to help you stay current, and a Slack room where you can connect with speakers and other attendees in real time. We'll also have a live roundtable video chat for attendees and speakers, plus we'll provide the talk recordings to you within days of the conference. Hey everybody, and welcome to another My JS story. This week we're talking to Laurie Voss. You want to say hi?
Hello everybody.
Now, you were on episode 99 of JavaScript Jabber with a nice round number there. We talked about NPM Inc.
Yeah, that's when NPM Inc. was a brand new thing that had just got started.
Yep, back in 2014. And here we are 3 years later and still going strong.
Indeed, going stronger than ever before. We have, the registry is 400 times bigger than it was the last time we spoke.
Oh, wow. That's crazy to think about. Just and what that means about the community, right? As far as either how many more problems are being solved in JavaScript these days in a standardized way, or how much larger the community is as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. We do math occasionally for the purposes of working out, how big is this thing going to get? We think there's about 11 million, maybe 12 million JavaScript developers in the world, and NPM has 7.5 million users.
Oh, wow.
So something like 65% of everybody who writes JavaScript is already using NPM. And we're pretty sure it's going to hit 100%. We don't see any reason why it wouldn't.
Yeah, I can't think of a reason why not. I mean, unless people are just terrified of third-party libraries. But
yeah, I feel like that ship has sailed in JavaScript land.
that ship has sailed in development land in general, I think. So
yeah,
and all the other systems out there, Ruby, Python, Perl. I mean, they all have package systems that you pull stuff down from. So yeah.
Yeah, I had an interesting experience of going to OSCON 2 weeks ago. OSCON, if you've not heard of it, is open source convention, which just in and of itself feels like an anachronism these days. It's like, what isn't open source? Like, everybody uses open source. Having a conference about open source software feels like having a conference about software. It feels way too general to be a thing. And it just shows, OSCON's one of the granddaddies of conferences. It just shows how far the industry has gone, right? It used to be this sort of, risky thing. You'd have a conference about how to convince your company to use open source. And that's just not a conversation anybody has anymore. They're like, we have to use open source. That's how you write software.
Yeah. The other thing is recently it's been a large conference. But I mean, I remember when, it wasn't as big a conference. It was just the diehard people out there. And now anybody who's anybody at least talks about open source, even if they're not heavily using and promoting it.
Right.
So yeah, and then NPM Inc. just released NPM 5, which is exciting. Congratulations, you guys.
Thank you very much. I'm extremely proud of the team who put it together. They have just been absolutely kick-ass recently. And NPM 5 is just the beginning of all of the stuff they have planned. It was... we actually had to stop them. We had to go slow down. I need you to put a release on this stuff and get a release out the door and save some stuff for NPM 6. But the stuff that they're putting together, it's just fantastic. I'm really, really looking forward to showing everybody what's in it.
That's right. Make our lives better and then keep making our lives better. We appreciate that.
Happy to help. Happy to help.
Nice.
Feel free to slip us a couple of bucks.
Yeah, I'll have to think about that. Let's go ahead and jump in on some of these questions that I sent you. The first one that I typically ask is, how did you get into programming?
I got into programming a couple of times. I dipped my toe into the water before I would say that I became a programmer. I went to a computer camp when I was 11 years old. It was hampered somewhat by the fact that was the first time I'd ever seen a computer, and I didn't know anybody who had a computer, and we didn't have a computer at home. So I would go to the computer camp, enjoy myself enormously, and then go home, and it would be another year until I went to computer camp again before I saw a computer. Because I grew up in Trinidad, which is, it's an island in the Caribbean, and it's not a particularly rich place. So a computer was a very expensive and rare thing when I was growing up. So around about 1996, the internet arrived in Trinidad for the first time. And that was when I really got into what I would call programming. That was like everybody else. I, got on the internet, and the very first thing I did was like, I want to build my own web page. So, I went on Angel Fire and, slapped together some HTML. CSS didn't exist yet, so it was just HTML.
Yep.
And that was how I got into programming, and I was hooked. I really, really love the web. I tell people that I'm a web developer first and a programmer second. I'm only doing the programming because that's what you need to do to build web pages. I really love the web, and it's always my driving force.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's funny because you mentioned Angel Fire. Yeah, that's kind of where I got into. I was in high school, and Angel Fire and GeoCities. I think I built sites on both of those way long ago. And yeah, then I kind of got away from programming and got back into it.
Which GeoCities neighborhood were you?
I don't remember.
I remember being Athens and being very, I'm a philosopher. I feel good in Athens.
That's funny. So I'm curious, how do you go from web developer to kind of hardcore JavaScript?
It's funny because I'm not really a hardcore JavaScripter.
Okay.
I've been writing JavaScript, since it was invented. Netscape released Netscape 2, I guess, was the first one that had JavaScript in it, narrowly escaping calling it LiveScript. And I'd already started a web development company in high school. So as soon as JavaScript was invented, everybody was like, we must have the JavaScript. So I learned it as soon as it existed for the purposes of putting it together. But I was never like breaking new ground in JavaScript. Okay. Isaac and I met, 10 years ago now, when we both worked at Yahoo, and we were both full-time web developers there. And he was the one who got me into Node, which got me into JavaScript in a more serious way. He was like, I think this Node thing, it's going to be a thing. I think it's going to be important. You should probably pay attention. And I was like, well, can I build web pages in it yet? And he was like, well, no, not really. And so it wasn't until 2013, he was like, yes, it's ready. You can build web pages in it now. And I was like, all right, we're in. And that was when NPM Inc. really got underway.
Nice. Yeah, I guess I just assumed that since you were at NPM, and NPM is all things JavaScript, that you were a hardcore JavaScript person. But yeah, so what do you do at NPM Inc. then? Are you still kind of managing web property stuff, or?
At the beginning of NPM in 2014, I was definitely doing a lot of programming and putting stuff together. I was the CTO when we started, so I was writing a bunch of JavaScript. I was architecting JavaScript, but mostly what I was doing was recruiting other people to write JavaScript.
Okay.
I'm proud to say that I'm the worst JavaScript programmer at NPM, because every time we've hired anybody, I made sure that they were a better JavaScript programmer than I was. And, that means that by definition, everybody's better at it than I am. So, I can do it, but the people we have here are the real wizards, the people who put amazing stuff together. What I do is I help make NPM happen. I was doing ops. I was doing some of the initial coding on the new version of the registry. I helped architect the registry. I did a ton of recruitment. And these days, I like to joke that my job is sort of like yelling at lawyers and accountants.
Nice.
I do models, and I do data, and I do funding. It's a lot of technical stuff about putting the numbers up behind stuff. But my contribution to JavaScript is to make NPM happen rather than to write any JavaScript in particular.
No, that's fair. And I think it's interesting to see that angle on things. Just I never really thought about yelling at lawyers and all of the other things that go into making this run, right? We just kind of take for granted that I type npm install on my project and I get all of the stuff I need. And so, yeah, there are people in the background, folks, that do all this other stuff that is important to make it happen.
Yeah, one of the things about open source is that there's a bunch of companies around who don't understand open source. And so they get confused and they do stupid things with lawyers. Like recently, this was about a month ago, I think, a magazine called L'Express decided that, they found out that there was this package called Express. In fact, a whole family of packages called Express on the NPM registry. And just through keyword,
really? What do they do?
Just through keyword matching, they were like, these people are violating our copyrights. They are stealing our magazine. So they DMCA'd the whole shebang. The entire Express ecosystem was removed from Google search results. And I had to be the one who was like, oh my goodness, let me get my lawyer to draft your lawyer an email explaining what the hell copyright is, because that's not how it works. So yeah.
Gosh.
So that's my sort of yelling at lawyers job, is protecting open source from overzealous corporations who don't understand what it is. Because, if they'd just gone to the authors of Express or any of the other open source packages that this kind of stuff happens to, they don't have any lawyers, they don't have any resources, they just get crushed. So NPM is there to sort of be the umbrella for that to the degree that we can possibly manage.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And it's something that's important because, if you're writing apps in Express, you kind of want Google to work for that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, cool. Well, what do you think is your biggest contribution then to NPM? Is it sort of the back end wrangling of all of this kind of businessy, legal, fundraising kind of stuff? Or, is it hiring the engineers that make the stuff that we, run on our machines? Or is it all of the above? I mean, how do you think about your job and what it means to everybody else?
That's a really interesting and complicated question. It's definitely shifting. If you'd asked me a year ago, it would have been, I am proud of the piece of software that is the registry.
Uh-huh.
I architected the first version of that we released, and it scaled a long way, right? It scaled to 200 times its original size. And, there's NPM Enterprise, which is another version of the same service-oriented architecture shrunk down to a single Docker container. And it's just sort of intrinsically cool, technically, that you can take the same architecture and run it at the scale of thousands of machines or one machine, and it works. That's cool, and I was really proud of that. But in the years since I moved out of the CTO position, every single piece of that service-oriented architecture has been upgraded or replaced or changed in some way. So it's now very much CJ's creation. And I sort of take a sort of second degree pride in what's going on, and that, I recruited these people and I kept this team from busting up, and I raised the money that keeps them all paid until we hit profitability. I just really am proud of how NPM has managed to scale both the software and the company and the community behind it. Like, there's 7.5 million people, and getting 7.5 million people to do anything without dissolving into a gigantic fight is kind of difficult. It's just amazing that everyone is so good natured. It's one of those things about NPM is that you hear, it gets into the press when there's a fight, right? It gets into the press when there's some kind of dispute or a fork, or, two people are arguing about something. But those are a tiny minority. And the vast majority, 99.99% of these 7.5 million people, they're just getting along great. And they really like the tool, and they're just building websites. And it makes me super happy as like I said, a sort of die-hard proponent of the web, that I build this thing that every day lets people build more websites.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm a little bit curious. So have you been at NPM Inc. since day one?
As a co-founder, I was there at day zero, yeah.
And how did that all come about? Did Issac say, hey, we're going to do this, do you want to be involved? Or did you all kind of come up with it together? Or...
So Issac had been running NPM on donated hardware, and in his spare time when he worked at Joyent on Node. He was the head of the Node project at the time. And NPM sort of became famous for being down all the time because it was on donated hardware and only one person was working at it, and not all of the time. So it would just break a lot. And we had a choice at that point. We could try and put it into a foundation and subsist on donations, or we could try and wrap a business model around it. We decided to wrap a business model around it because, when you have a business, it scales with the popularity. A foundation, it gets the same amount of donations every year, no matter what is happening with the service. So they get more and more popular with less and less money. But a business, it makes more money if more people use it. It scales better as a design. So Issac decided that the way to do this was to put a company together. But at the time, the only thing Issac knew how to do was write NPM. He'd never run a company before. But I'd done a startup just before that, and I was taking some time off. So he was like, who do I know who knows how to put a company together and knows how to hire engineers and knows how to do any of this stuff? I know Laurie, who I've conveniently known 10 years at this point. That will be really good. So yeah, that was when I got involved, and we formed the company at that point and got our first round of funding at the beginning of 2014.
Gotcha. So then how do you get from, hey, we've got this idea, we're going to build this business around it, to being profitable? Because I know that you raised some money, but that's not the same thing as being profitable.
Absolutely. So we are very careful to come up with a business model that aligns with our users. So, there's 9 billion downloads a month. We could charge a penny a download and we'd be enormously profitable tomorrow. But that would be terrible. We would never do that. So instead, we charge for the thing that people are willing to pay for, the thing that you would be suspicious if we gave it to you for free, which is private packages. If you want privacy, you pay for privacy. So if your company wants its own private NPM enterprise server, we will give you one of those. If you and your team, there's 3 or 4 of you, want to share packages between yourselves, then you can do that. And, you just sign up on the website. And that is getting us where we need to be. Enough people have the problem of sharing code within their company, and enough people appreciate the convenience of being able to use the single NPM tool to do everything, whether it's public code or private code, that we're going to get to profitability eventually. And we're really looking forward to that. We're really looking forward to being able to say, the NPM registry is self-sustaining by doing yet more things for the open source community that they appreciate.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk about how close you are to profitability, or is that not something that we should dive into?
It's not a question that has a firm answer. We make a certain amount of money right now, and if I knew that we'd never get any money ever again, I would have to lay off a bunch of people who work at NPM, but not all of them. And there would be enough left that we would be profitable tomorrow. And the registry has for a long time covered its raw operating costs, its servers and its bandwidth. So if we needed to, we could survive forever right now. But we'd never build anything new ever again, and life would suck for the people who remained. So when you're talking about a funded company, it's always the case that you could become profitable, or you could take more money and do more things. So that's always a thing up in the air. But I am confident in the future of NPM. I'm confident that NPM can and will exist forever at this point.
So what are the things that you're working on right now?
Well, as we mentioned, we just released NPM 5 today, which is like 5 times faster is the sort of the banner feature. It's a lot faster, but it also does a bunch of other stuff really well. And the CLI team are really excited about the new stuff that they're going to be able to put in there. That's going to make it easier to deploy, and it's going to make it easier to handle front-end packages and stuff like that. The stuff that on the server side that I'm interested in is there's 2 things that we're going to do. One is we're going to make deployments easier. So lots of people right now, they use NPM to put their software together, and then they also use NPM to deploy their software. They check out their code on a production box, and they run NPM install on a production box, and it downloads all of their dependencies, and then the server is ready to go. That comes with some risk because, if you didn't have a lock file, NPM 5 puts a lock file by default. But if you didn't have a lock file, then it's possible that the packages would change between what was running on your box and what was running on the server. But more importantly, even once you've got NPM 5 and its lock file, that just takes a long time, right? If you have to deploy to 1,000 boxes and each one takes 30 seconds to deploy, that's a lot of time. And what packages need to be there because you've already installed them to your local box. So why would you do it again? So we're probably going to add 2 new commands to NPM store and NPM fetch. And NPM store will take your entire node modules directory, your entire app, and cram it into a single file and put that on the server. And NPM fetch will fetch that one single file and put it back onto your production box. And because the average app has like 1,000 dependencies these days, that will be literally 1,000 times faster because most of the speed of a deploy is the requests, not the actual bandwidth.
Right.
So we're really, really looking forward to making people's app deploys 1,000 times faster. I think that's a feature people are really going to enjoy. And on the other side is a sort of grab bag of features that we call insights. One of the things about being NPM is that we sit at this sort of nexus of all of the activity of JavaScript in the world. So we see these 7.5 million users doing things. We can see what packages are getting more popular. We can see what packages get downloaded at the same time as other packages. We can tell when a package has a known security vulnerability. We know how big packages are when they're put into a front-end application. We can tell you whether they're slow or fast. We get 1.2 billion requests a day. That's an enormous amount of data about what JavaScript developers are doing. And we can expose that to JavaScript developers. We can tell us about your app. tell us what's in your app and we will tell you what to do with it. We will tell you this thing will be slow on the front end. You should use this package instead. This thing is a security hole. You should use something else instead. We can tell you you're using this package. A lot of people who are using this package have switched to this package recently. You should investigate. We can tell you just by looking at what everybody else is doing what the best practices are. And that is really useful information to the developers of JavaScript that we can give them, and I don't think anybody else can. So I'm really looking forward to being able to help you not just write JavaScript, but write better JavaScript than you used to.
That makes a lot of sense. And it's really exciting, I guess, to be able to get that information because, at least in my case, then I can go through that list and say, okay, which of these areas of interest are we not covering on the podcast? Or which of these areas of interest are people really looking into and, I should look into too, for my apps and for my things that I have going on.
Right. We just have so much information about what JavaScript developers are doing, and we've barely begun to scratch the surface of turning that into useful information for the community about what they can do with it. Nice.
Well, that's really exciting. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about as far as your experience as a developer or as an enabler of NPM before we go to picks?
Well, I should plug our paid products, obviously. NPM Organizations is our SaaS offering for your team to organize their JavaScript and help each other collaborate. NPM Enterprise, if you're a big company and you need single sign-on support or you want security plugins or license auditing, the kind of thing that really big companies care about, NPM Enterprise will give you that. So I appreciate the opportunity to plug there.
Oh, absolutely. All right, well, let's go ahead and go to picks. Do you have any other things you want to shout out about? Have you ever felt like you're falling behind or that the programming world is moving so fast that it's impossible to keep up? Then there's the issue of where to go to make sure you're up to date. The answer is to join a community dedicated to discussing the latest in JavaScript. I mean, wouldn't it be nice if you got JavaScript jabber all day? Well, you can, kind of. We've created a Slack community for JavaScript jabber. That means that you can connect with our listeners and guests on a platform you're most likely already using. Plus, we've set up a Keeping Current channel that pulls stories from across the web to help you know what people are talking about. And coming soon, we'll be holding monthly webinars and roundtable video chats to connect with experts in the community and with each other. So come join us at javascriptjabber.com/Slack.
The thing that I've been shouting out to everybody about recently is this company called Zeit, who are doing really, really fantastic things. In particular, a web framework called Next.js. Like I said, we sit at the center of the JavaScript universe, so we can see when something is really popular, and React is really, really popular. It's, React is not a train leaving the station. The train left the station. You're 3 stations behind. You need to get in a cab and catch up to the train because it's where web development is going. And one of the things that's kind of annoying about React is that you have to sort of get a lot of build chain stuff going to make it work really well. You have to have Webpack, you have to have Babel to really do it properly. And what I love about Next.js is that it's a sort of kitchen sink included framework for React. It will get you up and running, and you can just start writing React components without having to master all of the extraneous stuff. Like any kitchen sink framework, it has to make a bunch of choices for you in order to do that. To make it simple, it has to limit you a little bit. You probably wouldn't design your second system to use it, but as a prototype, as your first system, just to make sure you know what's going on and get some practice with it, it's great. And I've been recommending it to everybody.
Very cool.
And my other one is my favorite web app in the whole world, which I use every time I give a presentation, which is slides.com. If you've ever used a framework called Reveal.js to put together a slide deck, slides.com is from the same people. It's Reveal.js as a service, really, and it's just a masterpiece of web engineering. It is perfect. There's no edge case. There's no awkward corner. Everything works smoothly. Right clicks do what you expect it to do. Copy and paste does what you expect it to do. You can move stuff around. You can resize things. You can scroll through stuff. It's just seamlessly and perfectly engineered, and it's just the pinnacle of what web development can be when people are at the top of their game. So I like it as a tool, and also I love it as a developer. I'm like, I could be that good one day.
Nice. Very nice. I'm going to shout out about a couple of things here myself. One of the first ones is I'm going to be going to, I just barely signed up for the ticket, in fact, and I'm really interested to see how these kinds of things impact development. And that is, I'm going to be going to VMworld, which is VMware's conference.
Cool.
And that's in Las Vegas in August. So if you're in Las Vegas and you want to hang out or meet up, then definitely check that out. They have products for all kinds of things that I didn't really consider having VM products for, like IoT. So I'm really looking at getting a little bit more involved there and seeing what's out there. The other thing is that I had a really great conversation earlier today, which is the episode right before this, with Corey House, who's one of the panelists now on JavaScript Jabber, just talking about the future of JavaScript and where we think it's going. And I don't know if that made it into the recording or not, but I see a lot of movement in basically 3 areas: IoT, artificial intelligence, and VR, AR. And so I'm really curious to get into that. So this is more of a shout out for people to tweet or email me and just let me know if you're looking into some of those things, what resources you recommend, because I'd like to get a little bit more of that content into the shows and just see what else is out there. So yeah, in general, if you have something you like, an online course or a book or anything like that, let me know. All right. Well, if people want to follow you on Twitter or GitHub or see what you're doing these days, where are the best places to go to do that?
My Twitter handle is Seldo, Seldo, and that is definitely the best way to get in touch with me.
All right. Well, thank you for coming. It's really interesting to just see the story, and in this case, kind of the face and the person behind a lot of this work that we just don't think about with this stuff. And I think I speak for everybody in the community just saying how much we appreciate all the work that goes into NPM and a lot of the people work that we just don't think about that you wind up doing. So thank you from all of us.
Well, thank you very much for participating and for having me on your show.
Yeah, no problem. We'll wrap this one up and we'll have another one for folks next week.
Cool.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CacheFly.com to learn more.